things like Janja Lalich's keynote speech and things that I kept hearing people say from all these different groups from around the world, and get into how that works. And I'm even going to play a Christmas song by someone who just reached out to me after the conference from Denmark, who said, "Hey, I'm a former Jehovah's Witness, and I love what you're doing. I made a Christmas song, but I can't reveal who I am, but I'm going to play this song." So let me get right into it. Give me one sec. Okay, can you hear me now? Great. Also, I had to bring out the leopard print jacket for a fan who's also a film director, who said he loved that I did that. Okay, so I'm Scott Homan, if you haven't paid attention. And also, other really important note is I spoke on a panel called The Rock, the Watchtower, with a couple other ex-Jehovah's Witness activists and a Radio New Zealand investigative reporter who's kind of a whistleblower and did a bunch of work on the investigation into abuse and care by the New Zealand government, and that has wrapped up and the results are out. But she led the panel that we did, and that was really cool. And the reason why I was at Decult is because I was invited to screen the Witness Underground documentary that this channel is kind of known for, I guess. And that film is now out everywhere in the world at witnessunderground.com. So if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it. It's available everywhere, subs in Spanish and English. And you can watch it, you can rent it, or you can watch it with ads. And all of it supports the film. And please spread the news, and please leave a review on Rotten Tomatoes. But we just had our international premiere, which is so cool. So the day before the Decult conference, Witness Underground premiered at a sold-out Lumiere theater here in Christchurch. And surprise, surprise, because the film brought me to this side of the planet, I decided to just stay. And I landed in the coolest place. So if you saw on the image, there's an XCHC. It stands for the Exchange Christchurch, which is an artist residency and art space. And they have apartments. And turns out one of the guys that runs the place, the space itself, is also a former Jehovah's Witness, and we get along very well. So I decided to stay here for a while. So we'll see how long that lasts. But let me get right into it. One of the things I kept hearing from different people from all walks of life was, "Oh, I didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater." Oh, well, I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Oh, I definitely still believe I didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I'm going to get into my thoughts on that after a bit. But Decult Cult Awareness Conference, I think maybe the big takeaway is that they're trying to upskill people. First of all, bring awareness to a lot of the people that can make laws or do something about the topic. And okay, yeah, I'm glad I turned it off. Maybe I'll just repeat real quick. Government officials, skeptics, cult experts, human rights activists, healthcare workers, therapists, psychologists, psychotherapists, medical doctors, human and sex trafficking advocates, activists, journalists of all kinds, radio, print, podcast, lawyers, members of parliament, and film directors, and even satire artists, musicians were there. So an LGBTQ panel. So it was actually an incredibly diverse group of people. And it was incredibly well curated for that. And so if you get a chance to go to the next one, and I think there will be a lot of this happening for the next couple of months with let's talk about what happened at Decult. But it probably won't be another conference unless people demand it, because it was a lot of work and it was an all volunteer crew that put it together. And they did, I think, break even financially at least. So that's great. So it shows that there's demand, and it was a success in many ways. But it could have gone wrong. And there's a lot of curation in that large group of humans to bring them all together without any problems, without any protests, without any naysayers and or any scenes happening. There were some questions from the audiences here and there that were like, whoa, who's in the audience here? Which I thought was really interesting. But for the most part, everyone was incredibly well behaved and just a lot of different voices. It never once crossed my mind coming to Decult. Not that I didn't actually give it a lot of thought, but it didn't really cross my mind that who and what kind of voices would be represented there. Like, for example, they platformed ministers, active ministers who talk about their belief in God, let alone people that believe. And as a long-time atheist, I was a bit surprised because I thought I had deculted all the way. And when coming to Decult, that it would be a bunch of other people that had fully done the deconstruction work, but that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I think that's very apparent in the former Jehovah's Witness space, given that there's like a 50-50 split between, well, at least what you see on the internet anyways, is Christian groups on Facebook and Christian voices representing the true voice of God. And then lots of like vehement atheists who like to troll Christians. So I should have expected more variety, and it was great. Actually, I thought the people that they brought in and did represent were really smart and nuanced and heartfelt and well-meaning, putting their efforts into something valuable to help people on the outside, and also education. And people, a lot of people that came out of religious groups of various kinds, and I'll get into the list here in a minute, which also blew my mind. That had become like upskilled themselves to, I'm going to work in this space because I saw there's a need and I needed something and I didn't find a need. I didn't find my needs fulfilled getting out. So then they went and like became a working professional in the space. And we have an agnostic in the audience. Great. There was one of the coolest things I ever saw one of the coolest things I saw on the internet for me was it was someone posted in a group I'm a part of for former Jehovah's Witnesses, very neutral. What do you believe now? No judgment, no trolls. And it was just over 250 posts of people telling what their worldview or perspective on how reality works in comments. And it was like, oh, after leaving that religion, I became atheist. Oh, after leaving that religion, I found, Christianity. After leaving that religion, I went to, I became Buddhist or pagan or agnostic, or I was agnostic and then this happened, or I was atheist and then this happened, or I was Christian and then I realized I needed to deconvert more, or like deconstruct more, or then I was introduced to this, or then I tried psychedelics, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just went on and on and on. And some people just resonated, or like there was lots of likes and comments that were like positive and no one trolled. And it was like most worldviews represented, apart from almost no one joined another major religion, which I thought was fascinating. Anyway, so very diverse group of people. Probably, so I overheard people talking like, do you think that this religion sent in spies? Which I thought was, I never also considered that. Like, why wouldn't they? But it was, there was a decently high price ticket. But at the same time, for what it was, that was incredible. But the religion can afford, any religion can probably afford a ticket to send a representative to like find out. I also heard someone comment like, you guys, you're giving it all away. People can go to Decult and learn how to run a cult, which I'm almost certain that's not happening. But yeah, I mean, maybe. Not that they couldn't just watch the Netflix series, How to Start a Cult, or read up on any group. But okay, so the cults that were represented, so half of these, like, I never even considered, I didn't know they existed. And then some are famous. So let's get into it. So there's someone who survived the Branch Davidian. So this person met Poya, her name is, famously met David Koresh. There was only like 70 people in this cult. So she was there and she spoke, and it was a beautiful, touching thing about her and her sisters. She got her sisters wrapped up into it. Luckily, one was out before the place lit on fire after the FBI got in. The IBLP, who's now famous with the Duggars, I think, what's it called? Shiny Happy People documentary just came out. So there's people there representing them. The Moonies, also famous. So you've maybe heard of all of those. And then this group called New Religious Movements, who are all super culty. The Truth, the 2x2s, the Exclusive Brethren, Children of God, and the Jehovah's Witnesses. And then Nixium, remotely through Sarah Edmondson. She popped in on a video through her podcast. Well, she does a podcast called Little Bit Culty about the Nixium group, their self-empowerment group, famously now known as a sex cult, with leaders now in prison, thanks to their work with their lawyers and the Vow. ISTA, which I'd never heard of, a sexual liberation tantra or sex magic group. They operate out of Israel, I believe, but they're all over there in California as well. believe it or not. Agama, which is like up in Southeast Asia, I believe. They're a yoga or like regional group. There's a South African cult. I can't remember their name, but one of the volunteers like had been involved in that, or raised in or grew up in. Osho from Wild Wild Country, through the Cult Trip, the book by Anka Richter. She gets into that one, and Ista, as well as two cults that are famous and well known here in New Zealand, one of which is mostly dismantled or all the way dismantled, and the other one is still in operation. And also there's a woman here who's a filmmaker, which I don't think I was in my list at the top of like who was all there. She made a film about Gloria Vale, I believe, but also Centerpoint. These are two more classic cults with Compound, and the leaders having everyone's making babies basically for many generations. Someone there from Falun Gong, which ironically I was just walking with my Chinese American friend in Los Angeles, and I was like, what is this? There's like hundreds of people all wearing the same outfit doing Tai Chi. And we walked past them again in the park later, and they had baozi, which is like this breaded food. And I'm like, oh my God, I haven't had baozi since I was living in Vietnam. I bet if we talked to them, because they look like a cult, we could get free food. And so we did. And we got a huge talking to about how their cult beliefs, and got free baozi, which is delicious breakfast. And then there's also Teal Swan was there, represented by someone. I didn't get to meet all these people, but I was listening to most of their cult panels and speeches. And also it was mentioned mostly, and I believe a couple times, but especially Janja Lalich talks about how the rise and influence of online groups being a new thing, where you have to pay for access, but you can join a cult from the comfort of your own home, sitting on your couch. You don't have to go to a ashram or anything, any kind of religious building, or meet the people in person. You can now just pay them from the comfort of your own couch and get influenced by them. So that kind of blew my mind. And I think it was overwhelmingly obvious that all those groups sound insanely different, but ultimately they all have some kind of transcendent belief system. They all have a single leader who is the connection to God or the divine or the beyond or the source energy, or a group of leaders who used to have a leader, but now they're a group of leaders, but they also kind of take that role. And then like 50 more nuances. You're like, seriously, you had to deal with that too? Oh my God, I can't believe you had to deal with that too. Or some weird thing about sex, like you have to do more of it, or you're not allowed to do any of it. But if you do it, you have to tell us all the dirty details. And like somehow people getting involved in these like really personal parts of your life, and boundary crossing beyond your imagination. And I think, and those kind of lead to kind of Janja Lalich's whole thing about bounded choice, when people that are staying in these things, joining these things, or still feel like it is the only path to God, or that it has value still, comes down to what she has with her PhD, Dr. Janja Lalich PhD, coined the term bounded choice. And I recommend everyone read her books about the topic. And she's an incredible person. It was so cool. Actually, one of the highlights for me was getting to meet her. Hearing her keynote first was like, yeah, I've heard of all these famous cults from last century. And then it was like, oh, I never heard of that one. Oh, wow, that's still going on. Whoa, I can't believe that things are still happening just like that. She made this like long list of all these different cults, like I just did basically. But like in order of succession, and like how severe they are and how big they are and how imposed on people's lives they are, and like how many people have died, and just like shocking. It's shocking what's still going on, and somehow the authorities have no idea what to do, or it violates, they feel like they can't overstep their bounds of religious freedom, and also the mechanisms of control and the narcissistic leadership. It goes on and on and on, and it's similar amongst all these groups, but there's only a couple governments in the world that have done anything about the topic. Austria had a representative, so there's this one that was really cool. I got to meet Ulrike Schiese. I actually interviewed her on this channel. She works for the Skeptics and Misinformation anti-cult like awareness group in Austria and through all of Europe. Like for the pandemic, she was brought into a lot of shows publicly and to discuss like how do you recognize misinformation from valid information. So she's a professional skeptic with no connection to any cults. That was also really refreshing. Also, Dr. Janja Lalich's perspective was from a political cult, which I didn't mention in the list. So there's just such a variety of people. If you're still here, I forgot to mention, you can actually access the entire Decult collection of 20 different video segments that have all been packaged by a very professional team who are there on site live streaming the entire conference. They have now packaged everything into bite size, as seen in person panels and discussions and speeches, I guess you could say, for a very affordable price. It's around $50 US, 75 New Zealand. But you can go to decult.net, and I'll put the link in the description already for the YouTube for where to click to get that. So you might see little clips here and there come out, but ultimately it goes to the Decult Trust, which is a nonprofit, and that will allow them to keep on funding the next one. And they probably will do it in 2026. But if you put pressure on Anka and the team, and there's large support globally, they might do one sooner. So go support them, buy the conference. Incredible education was there. Other professionals like Gilly Jenkinson, she ran a 2-day workshop and then a 1-week workshop after to help people upskill that are working in the professional space. There's so many people that were represented. And then some of the great podcasts, just shout out to these podcasts. Let's Talk About Sex. I got to meet the host, Sarah, there. Indoctrination podcast came on remotely, a little bit culty. Sarah Edmondson came on remotely with the video. Cult Chat, he's a local one here in New Zealand. I got to meet all the women who run that briefly, at least. And Skeptics New Zealand with their podcast called Yeah, Nah, which is actually funny and cool. And they've just done a decompression episode about their experience here at Decult Awareness Conference. The Guilty Feminist, which is actually run by a former Jehovah's Witness. The Cult Vault, which has recently done some episodes again, as the person who runs that has been going back to school. The Influence Continuum, which is a Stephen Hassan podcast. He interviewed Anka before the conference. One called Divorcing Religion. And then, of course, this show. I interviewed, I believe it was 6 or 7 of the people that were in the conference as speakers before the show, including Ulrike Schiese and I'm going to blank on everyone. Lindy Jacob, who runs the Olive Leaf Network, Liz Gregory, and the Gloria Vale Leavers Trust, Dr. Carolyn Ansley, Anka herself, and the author of Excommunicated, the exclusive brethren, LGBTQ gentleman. I'll look it up. I feel that. By Craig Hoyle. Sorry, Craig. And so it was cool to meet all those people in person. I love that. And okay, so I guess the time has come to give you my 2 cents on the idea of, well, first of all, the things I thought were missing, and this idea of throwing out the baby with the bathwater. One of the things I thought was missing, I'll get into this first. There's all these people, for the most part, it was diverse in faith, diverse in experiences, diverse in age, diverse in current belief systems and past belief systems. But it felt like everyone was saying, this is what doesn't work. This is how my community imploded. This is how I lost community. I felt like I belonged to something. And then it was all taken away, or I got kicked out, or I was excommunicated, or I realized I didn't believe anymore, and then I got punished with shunning, or a very complicated situation where, like, and there's a big difference. They actually got into this a lot with a panel called Kids in Cults, which I thought was really interesting. It had a former witness on it. It had a former Children of God person on it, and a couple other voices. And they talked a lot about the difference between being raised in a group, a coercive, manipulative group or cult, versus joining it yourself as a young adult or an adult and then leaving. Like, the experiences are very, very different. One is like, that's where your ideas are shaped, and you make all of your relationships. You like form what it's like to be friends with somebody. You form what it's like to be intimate with somebody, and how that works. And all those standards are set by the religion, versus someone who grows up in the general society and then joins a group later who's done all the things that are not allowed in the cult, but then now there's things against rules that they decide to adhere to. Like, that experience is wildly different. And I guess I grew up in a way, a little bit in two worlds. And I got to see my parents kind of make those decisions and choices as they were growing up, in a sense, as young parents, in their like late 20s, early 30s, deciding to join this thing and deciding which parts of it they accepted and didn't. And I was like, well, they say you can't do that. I'm not sure how I should handle my parents not accepting that part of it, but I have to somehow. And all my peers seem like they have to. And it's like, it's apparently a bounded choice, where it's like, basically the Janja Lalich's point is like, it's a high stakes life or death decision whether or not you have sex before you're married in the Jehovah's Witnesses, for example. You lose your community or get kicked out, but like, people that join as adults don't have to do that. They don't have to make that decision. They can decide to adhere to that after having, no consequences, made those types of decisions in their past. So that was a fascinating difference. And then the panel on LGBTQ plus, there was two different rooms, so I ended up going to see the tantric sex magic speech instead of watching that one. But I've heard that it was just really nice to have a panel that discussed the nuances for the LGBTQ perspective, and like its special different problems that they face and challenges in the religion, and then the leaving aspect, like the coming out twice type angle, and how similar so much of this is from group to group. Okay. The Rock the Watchtower panel that I was on with Laura Kaput. So for all the XGWs out there, this was really interesting. So Anusha Bradley ran the panel and had me on it, representing Witness Underground as the director of Witness Underground, which is an activist film. Excuse me. The motivation was activism originally, but it's a piece of art. And I think if you haven't seen it yet, you should go watch it. No matter what group you come from, or if you never were a part of a cult, it's just one of those, it will take you on a journey that will add value to your life. So that was really awesome. That was really special to be able to represent that. And they really did get into the nuance of why we did it. So maybe I'll be able to share some clips from that in the future, but you can get it now if you go buy the ticket and watch all the on-demand streamable sessions. It was really cool to meet Laura Kaput. Actually, she did a lot of activism in Australia and Pennsylvania. So she worked with Barbara Anderson, who's like globally famous in the Jehovah's Witnesses and the ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. She was the researcher behind the Proclaimers book in the Jehovah's Witnesses, which is like the entire history of the religion from a propaganda angle. But she did all the research for that. And then during her time in the writing department, the only woman in the writing department for that religion, she ended up whistleblowing child sex abuse issues in the religion after getting like over 1,000 letters sent to her department. And they were bringing it to the leadership and them saying to basically shut it down and don't say anything, and they're going to handle it. And that was all in response to an article that the religion published about it. So just a touch of history in the witnesses, where people were like, yeah, this is terrible. You're right. The Awake article about this CSA issue is correct, but it happens here in this religion. This isn't an outside problem with the Catholics. Don't point fingers at anyone else. This is a massive problem. I've been like had my voice shut down. I got kicked out of the religion because of this. And the letters came pouring in. So she ended up creating the Silent Lambs. And she's been an activist ever since. And she has her own show. And she's sweet, funny, vibrant, extroverted woman who's written a book about the leaders of that religion and the wife, Charles Taze Russell and his wife. I can't remember her name at the moment because she's basically been left out of history. But she wrote a book to bring that up. But she did a lot of work, apparently. I didn't know this about the Pennsylvania lifting the statute of limitations, which is a law that every state in the U.S. at least has it, where if you did some sexual harassment or worse in that space, from that, if the perpetrator is not taken to trial or a report made within a certain time limit, usually it's like a year or two. Every state's different. Then that person can never be accused of that for the rest of their life. So Pennsylvania took away that strange protective law. Like there's no other law like that for serious crimes except for that one. And it has shut up a lot of victims. And so they removed that law. So Laura Kaput had something to do with writing and helping out in Pennsylvania. So that was great. But she also had a lot to do with the Australian Royal Commission. And also her and Shane, if I recall this correctly, Shane Metchin was also on the panel. So it was the three of us being interviewed by Anusha Bradley in front of the audience. Shane did a lot of work with the New Zealand's investigation into abuse in care in New Zealand, and witnesses sued. I believe the number was over 30 different times to not be investigated. And they lost every time. Went to the Supreme Court of New Zealand and they lost. So they had to be investigated. So that report is out. So if you're interested in that topic, you can go find out how that all went and what the results were. I didn't actually hear. Must not have been shocking enough to talk about. But Laura did, and I'd be surprised. So correct me if I'm wrong. If you know about it, I'll write a link to it in the comments later or in the description. Laura put together, it was comically in the thing. She had these thick bounded laminated pamphlets that she had written, which are like her collection of work on how to handle adjusting laws in different countries and different policies, how to handle education, to change something for the better when it comes to human rights, protection of children, education for government officials, education for the youth, the general public on these issues of cults and coercive control, manipulation, narcissistic abuse, spiritual abuse. She made a big push to really protect the next generation. And she just there's so many moments in the thing where she's like, oh, I wrote a whole book about that here. This could be policy right now. It's already written, or at least it's written to inform governments of things they could employ to solve these problems going forward. So she's a very intelligent and she's got just going there for the right reasons. I can say that. Okay, and I think finally, I guess I'll wrap this up with my idea on a little past a clean 30. Throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So all those different groups represented, I heard this idea a bunch of times from different people, just in passing. I didn't want to throw that out with the bathwater. I didn't want to throw it out with the bathwater. That concept, I was like, what is that? I understand the general meaning, and mostly it was in the context of, I believed in the worldview of the religious group that I was a part of. But then I wanted to get rid of all the bad stuff and get out of that group. But also, I still believe in Jesus, or I still believe the Bible has value, or I still believe in God, or I still want to worship, or I still pray. And everyone had a different thing to say about what that baby was that was important. But generally, I think that's what the gist of it was. And as I mentioned at the outset, I was walked out of the Kingdom Hall when I left this religion, when I finally was done. The surprise was I'm atheist. God's not real. Not only is this religion wrong about God, It's like, it's wrong. All religions are wrong about it. And it's not real. It took me a while to like embody that and like really have that feel correct. Because I had spent quite a bit of my life believing in demons as my source of my faith. Hey, Jonathan, X Minutes Awake just popped in. But for me, so I had to like, just like try to put those clothes on in a sense, in a metaphorical sense, like, oh, what's that scary noise? Oh, it's not demons, right? They're not real. After a while, I just like, there weren't scary noises anymore. There were just noises. So it took a while to like sort of embody that perspective, but it was clear to me that God, that religion taught wasn't real. But the religion had taught me throughout my entire life that all the other religions were worshiping false gods that didn't exist. So really, Jehovah's Witnesses are like, for me, we're like an atheist machine, like consistently pointing a finger at the flaws in other groups and why their perspective is wrong, to the point that they have a book on the major world religions that I decided was their best book and used it for preaching. No one else does that in that religion. But I would go door to door. I was taking it was like their little red book. It's not a communist book. But I was taking this book and it's like, basically Islam is wrong for this reason. Hindu is wrong for this reason. Buddhism is wrong for this reason. Jainism is wrong for that reason. And it was like only 9 religions, and there are thousands of different perspectives. But for me, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, I've been reflecting on this a lot. That like, it doesn't mean that you have to become atheist, but that was sure a clean slate. I felt that throwing out the baby, if I can say that, was the right move, because and this is my quip, I guess I'm coming up with, you gone and went atheist, from Jonathan. Yeah, well, that, like, the witnesses help with that. I spent the last like years of my time in the religion only talking to atheists. I refused to talk to anyone else. So all the people in the congregation were giving me like, oh, here's an address for an atheist. Good luck with that. I had this like collection of short lists of atheists. That's right. The Man Can Search for God book. Thanks, Jay. That's a Witness publication, where they misquote people. But one of the famous ones is by Fred Hoyle. He's a famous astronomer, astrophysicist, something like that. And that he actually is sort of like an apologist to some degree. So the witnesses do quote him a lot, but so I would use that going door to door. Anyway, throwing out the baby with the bathwater, what I think is valuable about that is that if the baby's real, it will be evident in your life or in your experience at some point. But I think it's important after you leave a group where you've been indoctrinated or you believe something that is, well, clearly by being in a cult, whatever that is or however that happened, it's proof that we are programmable. Every human is, I believe, but we are living proof that we are programmable, and that we're probably not in an objective position to decide what is real and what is not real. And like, what if that baby that you protected in your mind is dripping in the bathwater? What if it's still soaked? Or I don't know if I can, maybe that's a terrible analogy. Like, apologists and Christians and believers love to use that one because it should be really obvious, right? Like the baby and the dirty water they were just bathing in should be very easy to discern what is what. So that's a terrible analogy as someone who's trying to make a different point. It's like, what if your, fruit's covered in shit? Like, get rid of it all and get a different fruit. I don't know. Maybe there's someone in the thing can do an analogy, but basically, I think it's important to just try to be totally objective. And for me, it was important to just say like, okay, none of this is real. Any old program that comes up, I'm going to assume when I think about praying, or I think that it's God, or I think it's an angel, or I think it's a demon, which is far more of what was going on in that religion I grew up in. Demons were what I felt all witnesses put their faith in, not God or angels. Anything supernatural that happened was always demons. That it's all wrong. And we're living proof that we are not good at discerning what is real from what's unreal, that we believed this thing. So for a while, at least, I think it's important to completely do the work of recognizing the patterns. And at some point, let's give it 6 months or a year. You're like, you know what? I had this crazy experience that I couldn't explain. And you go try to figure out what it is from a neutral point of view. Like, try to explain it from the skeptic's point of view. Try to explain it from an objective point of view. Get other people's input on it that don't share your past worldview. And read books that are not from the Christian or whatever other lens you're deconstructing from. That was really important to me. For example, I read Michael Behe's book. I can't believe I just said his name. He doesn't need to be platformed. But he wrote a book basically on not young earth creationism. Irreducible complexity is the concept. And I told one of my, at the time, had recently also left, former Jehovah's Witness. And he's like, have you read this article or this magazine or this debunks that guy? Read that, because you need to have another perspective. And so I read a whole book that was like their scientists' reaction to irreducible complexity. And that wasn't the title, but it's something like that. And it really broke down everything that this other person was claiming in their book and proved with evidence they're wrong. And I was like, right, this is more in the vein of research. This is how you learn things, is you learn something that's very interesting, but it's, in that case, it was biased towards what I already had believed. And then I read something that countered that, but proved it with evidence, or disproved it to be in that case. And then I was like, oh, I spent my whole life doing confirmation bias research. And that's not research. That's confirmation bias, which is basically looking for things that confirm what I already believe. That's not research. And a lot of people just do that. And I think if you live in the space of that scary noise is scratching the walls, which I still, to be honest, I haven't a lot. It hasn't happened since I didn't believe in demons anymore, but for a really long time, there was scratching on the walls. It freaked me out constantly, most nights, to be honest, for years. And I just was like, okay, there's demons in the next room or in the room. I just have to deal with that and go to sleep because I have to wake up in the morning for work. I never heard the scratching on the walls after that. So something in my psychology was priming me for patterns and that I could claim were part of reality, that when I no longer believed the source of the thing, the pattern stopped being observed, which I find really fascinating. And also just one more piece of the deconversion process, the deconstruction of the worldview. And by the way, I'm going to be having an author on who just wrote their first memoir about demons. So I read the first chapter. It's so good already. So that's coming up soon. But anyway, that was my little thing. Let's see what Jonathan just said. But did you do science project based solely on the Blue Creation book? In the film Witness Underground, we highlight the Blue Creation book. The Jehovah's Witness publication that wildly misquotes many, many people, including Darwin himself, and the Witness Underground film exposes that misquote by showing what it actually says and how they misquoted it, meaning the exact opposite of what Darwin himself had meant. But no, I didn't ever go back into that book. That's a good idea. Well, it would have been a good idea for the propaganda of spreading false religion or just religion on people, as I was doing. So any thoughts in the comments, feel free to put them out there. I think that's about all I have. if you are looking for one more plug for my film, witnessunderground.com for all the ways to watch it around the planet. It is now available to watch on Amazon, Apple, Tubi, YouTube, and about 10 other places. I'm in New Zealand right now. If you're here, it definitely works on Tubi TV and Vesta Stream. Vesta Stream, as people have told me, it works there. It's another smaller streaming service with ads. Oh, Jonathan did a science-based project solely using the Blue Creation book. You should do a challenge to that science project now as an ex-witness. Oh, and then I also want to plug one more time, Decult. Go to decult.net to find out more about the Decult Cult Awareness Conference and all of the experts and interesting representatives mentioned. There's like over 40 people that have a picture and what they represented. Reach out to them if you want to have them on your shows. If you run a show, get in touch with them. They are all very friendly people. They want to do something in this space, or they are already doing a lot in this space. Oh, there's one more thing I wanted to point out about community. But yeah, go there, buy a ticket. You can still buy a ticket to now watch the post stream of the conference that's really well packaged by a professional documentary crew. And there will be a documentary following. I did a short, like 3-minute spot for one of the interviews. Who knows if I'll make it into the film, but a lot of people were interviewed at Decult to be a part of the Decult documentary, which is really exciting. That'll probably come out next year. But you can now go watch all the panels and probably likely they'll pull from those panels. There's a lot of very powerful stuff happening there that is unprecedented in the world. The Decult Cult Awareness Conference is the first of its kind, they say, in Australasia, but I really think it's the first of its kind in the whole planet, because ICSA is really more for academics and governments, and it's not really a curated thing. And this is academic to a point, is in that we had a couple, professional academics there presenting, but for the most part, it was like just an incredible mix of people blending together with very different perspectives, worldviews, and all with the intention to help change the world. Oh, and I mentioned underneath the Christmas song, Buddhananda, a satire artist. So look up Buddhananda by Dave Buddha. I think it's Buddhanaki. I'm probably butchering his last name. He goes by Dave Buddha, or has been for a long time. Buddhananda is a white shaman satirical act where he makes fun of white shamans. He's not white. So it's so funny. He's such a talented musician and artist, and he plays this incredible character. He performed at the opening night, like after dinner. So funny. And I got to hang out with him. So he also stayed at the same artist residence at Exchange Christchurch. And the last thing I wanted to mention was what was missing at Decult, and I think would be great for Decult in my final moments here, was how to do community. And Dave, that same white Buddha, white shaman, satirical writer, he also did a panel about ISTA, the sex magic group. But he said something I really like. He's working on an idea, so I'm not going to give too much information, but basically he said this sentence: it's really hard to belong. No, that wasn't it. It's really hard to create community, but it's really easy to start a cult. And I had it resonating in my ear since the first day or the day before the conference. And it got me thinking about how there wasn't really anybody on the platform, or I didn't really hear any good ideas about how to have a viable community, or how to start a community, how to join. What is a healthy community? How do you go from being in an unhealthy community? If you're watching this, you're probably from an unhealthy community or were a part of one at some point. It's not your fault. But there was no one really there talking about this is how you do it. We should, follow this group, check out what they've done, join them. They exist, go learn from them. I would love to see in a future Decult conference, here's a community that works, and this is why it works, and sharing ideas on how it works. But all that being said, I did meet someone who was Maori, and I specifically went to meet them because I was curious why at a New Zealand conference where half of the thing is presented or introduced with Maori language, kia ora, for example, which is like a pleasant introduction, hello, kind way. I actually don't know what it means, to be honest. I'm still figuring out how they use Maori here, but I've only met one Maori person. And apparently they're more represented in the North Island. I'm in the South Island. But I was kind of surprised to not have a Maori person on the panel or discussing. There was Maori art to open and close, kind of ceremoniously with the song. Just nice that they did that. They're very respectful of the culture here in general. Like everybody seems to be, which is really cool. But I talked to this one person who's half or part Maori, just personally, and they're a sex trafficking advocate in the government. So not really related to the topic, to be honest, of leaving high control groups, but still working to better the general society. And I think that's what ultimately this conference is about. That like cults are in the general society. Cult members are your neighbors, and so are former cult members, and your kids are being influenced by cults, but like society could be influenced by people who've successfully navigated cult mind control. But this is a person who's outside of that realm. And I got asking, like, what do you think of the conference so far? And like, what are you getting out of it? And we talked about community as part of that conversation. And I think maybe it was even her that pointed this out, that like there isn't really like, all these, basically, to put it in a nutshell, all these white people talking about how they came from a broken community. What happened to the like European colonial cultures that are different than the Maori culture? Because basically they were saying like, oh, they have community in the Maori world, family, and like just in general, like a vibrant, healthy, and I'm sure like every group has their own issues, like community's hard, but they have community. Like they're like this, we're not looking out for meeting new people. Like we're good. We have so much going on, people we want to spend time with, nieces, nephews, aunts, uncles, grandparents, community members. That like, if you're part of a historical, traditional, or indigenous group, that's just a part of your life, that the community's built in, and you want to spend time with them. And it just got me thinking, like, well, what happened to the European and settler colonial culture that we're striving after building religious cults and sex cults and everything else mentioned that were represented at Decult? And I think it has to do with maybe the Catholic systematic extermination of all things that were not Catholic and Christian for 1,500 years, through the Dark Ages, creating the Dark Ages by murdering people, hanging and burning them if they created a psychedelic brew for one of their pagan ceremonies, and pagan meaning like their actual beliefs that were passed down from their families, not something against Christians. It was just like, that was what they believed. And I'm not here to advocate for paganism or psychedelics on this episode, but like if you kill all of your wisdom keepers and all the people connected to nature, all the people that do rituals with the seasons, like maybe that is the source of the destruction of community in the cultures all these people came from. Just a thought. Love to hear what you think in the comments. But I would like to see people represented and platformed who are part of active communities to talk about what works and what doesn't. And so if you're part of a community that you think is not a cult, I will be skeptical if you represent a community that is culty, but you're going to tell us it's not a cult. Our radars are high. and very functional, and we successfully navigated cult mind control. So I and many people that watch this channel are very aware of how cults work. But I would love to hear how you think your community or your indigenous culture or even your hometown community works. Like, what creates community? Does the government have a way? Is there a secular thing that can be done for all of us atheists and agnostics out there who don't have any time for space daddy? Can we mix, like, what was interesting to me, like I mentioned, progressives, conservatives, ministers, believers, and atheists can we have a functional community where we coexist and support each other? Maybe. I mean, we have to do it, right? We do live in the same towns. And I feel like right now with the US election anyways, I'm escaped the chaos living abroad now again. But it was very palpable, and in the internet, it's just a lot of noise for at least what's curated for me. So I feel like we have to figure it out, because being divided doesn't help. Anyway, thanks for your thoughts, everybody. Thanks for showing up, Sasha, Jay, and Jonathan. I'm going to close out with go leave a review on Rotten Tomatoes for Witness Underground. All the ways to stream at witnessunderground.com. Thanks, y'all. That's been fun. See you. Get in touch.